Assalamu alaikum. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. In the name of Allah, the most beneficent and the most merciful. Guys, in my previous lecture, I explained about the types of bracket, right? Now I'm going to explain about the brief concept of domain. Domain plays a very important role in function, right? Once you understand the concept of function, you must know what is the domain of this one. Domain and range. This is very important, and inshallah I will make at least 10 lectures based on domain only, right? It's my favorite subject also, so I'm going to explain you about domain and range. So here in this video I'm going to give you a brief introduction of domain. I'm not going to solve any question, but in my next lecture you will see I will just upload a lot of videos based on domain, right? Okay, so the topic today is domain. Domain, what is the meaning of domain? Guys, you know, in mathematics, for example, I have fx, right? And for example, fx is equal to x plus 2. I have this function. Fx, what is fx? I told you this one, this is y, means y is equal to x plus 2, right? What is x here? Where x belongs to real number. What is real number? This one. This is your real number. This is 0, 1, 2, minus 1, minus 2, and so on. This is what? Minus infinity, and this is what? Positive infinity. This is real number, right? Where x is a real number means you can take any value of x from this real line. You can take 3, 4, 5, minus 1, minus 2, minus 3, any number from minus infinity to positive infinity, right? You can take any number here. And then you have to plug in here. And then you have to calculate what? Fx, right? So what is the meaning of domain here? Okay, domain means for which value of x or for what values of x this function defined, means on which values of x, means you will have a lot of values of x from minus infinity to positive infinity, right? And when you plug in here, this must be defined. This is very important concept. When you give any value here, okay, for example, you say x is equal to 2 is a domain. So when you plug in here, this value must be exist, or you can say this value must be defined, right? Then you can say, yeah, x is equal to 2 is a domain. So domain means for which value of x, for what values of x the function exists, right? So here, if you can, for example, we have x plus 2 linear equation, right? Here you can put 1, 2, 3, 5, minus 1, minus 2. From minus infinity to positive infinity, if you take any number and plug in here, you will see the function always exists, always defined. So you can say, so the domain of this function is real number. You can say real number. There are many ways to represent this one. So I will tell you step by step. This is real number. Means we will say D for domain belongs to R. Means D belongs to R. Means the domain of this function is real number. Means, sir, if you say the domain is real number, it means from minus infinity to positive infinity, we can take any number, right? And this function is always exist. I'm going to give you another example. Then you will understand better, right? Okay. For example, if I say I have another function y is equal to 1 by x. It's a rational function, right? Y is equal to 1 over x, right? We have to find, what is my question? Find the domain. Find the domain. Okay. Find the domain. So here, and this is also x, you have to write where x belongs to real number. Means from minus infinity to positive infinity. So now I have a question. In this rational function, if you just put here 10, so 1 over 10, the function is defined, right? If you put 9, 8, 7, 5, 4, 3, 2, whatever the number minus infinity to positive infinity, if you give here, the function exists except the value of x is 0. If you put 0 here, only in the case of 0, because in mathematics, if a number is divided by 0, the function does not exist. Okay, the function never defined. Okay, so remember one thing, you can put any value of x except 0. So the domain, you can say the domain belongs to real number except 0. This one. It means domain means the value of x, the values of x, the set of x, you can say, right? So you can put any value of r here. It means you can put any value of r except 0. Except 0. Except 0. Because if you put 0 here, so 1 by 0, you cannot find any solution because y never exists. If 1 is divided by 0, the function does not exist. So the domain will be a real number. Domain will be real number except 0. I am going to give you one more example. For example, the same I have, for example, 1 divided by x minus 2, for example, right? And my question is again, find domain. Find domain. So again, here, x minus 2. In my next lecture, I will explain you everything. Just here, I am going to give you a brief introduction. What do you understand by the word domain, right? So here, x minus 2, right? Here, if you give any value of x, because x belongs to what? A real number. So you can give any number from minus infinity to positive infinity. But the problem that when x is equal to 2, when x is equal to 2, when x is equal to 2, only when x is equal to 2, so 2 minus 2, it becomes 0. So 1 by 0, again, the function does not exist or the function never defined. So we can say only at x is equal to 0, x is equal to 2, it does not exist, right? It does not exist. Okay, so what is the domain now? So the domain, you can say, the domain is belongs to real number except what? 2. Means you can write any value of x. Domain means, again, domains means values of x. So you can put any value of x except what? Except 2. Because if you put 2 here, so 2 minus 2, 0. So 1 by 0 does not exist. So the domain is real number except 2. Right? I can give you more example here. So, for example, if I give you this one, just I'm giving you a brief introduction of domain. When you solve a lot of questions, then you will understand the concept of domain, okay? And when you know the graphs, it will be so easy to understand the concept of what domain of any function, right? Okay, if we talk about the square root functions, as I told you before, square root of function, right? Sorry, it's not working now. Oh, this is also not working. and I have just two marker. Okay, I will start here. Sorry. Square root function. When I say square root function, it means we will take the positive side only. Okay? Square root function. For example, I am going to give you this equation. Y is equal to under root x. Right? This is a square root. I am talking about a square root function. It means I am going to take just the positive side of this one, right? Okay, I'm not going to take the negative side because I said this is a function. So function in the square root, we take the positive side and ignore the negative side. This is a square root function. Okay. So y is equal to under root x. My question is, what is a domain? You have to find domain here, right? Domain. Okay. So again, I said to you, there is a, the attribute here means you can say here there is a situation here, right, in a square root, because the behavior here is totally different of a square root function. If you give here 0, y exists, y defined. If you give any positive value of x, I'm going to mention here the nature of x here. If you give x is equal to 0, no problem, it exists. If you give the value greater than 0, mean all positive number, it exists. But for the square root function, if x is less than 0, I'm talking about x is less than 0, then this one does not exist, because this is the nature. If you give here, for example, if you say y is equal to under root minus 2, I said to you x is less than 0, means minus 2 is less than 0, right? So we cannot say we have a real value. We say does not exist. We cannot find the real values of it. I'm not talking about the complex number, right? So does not exist. Does not exist. So whenever you have any negative value here, the function does not exist. So when it exists, because domain means exist, for which values of x the function exists. So only there is one case for the square root, when the domain is this x must be 0 or greater than 0. Means the domain here from what? 0 or what? Greater than 0 from this side. Then you can say the function exists. But for the negative value, there is no graph here, right? So the domain is 0 or greater than 0. Okay guys, and inshallah in my next lecture I will give you a lot of questions based on square root function, rational functions, quadratic equations, linear equation, absolute functions, greatest integer functions, least integer functions, okay, signum function. I will give you a lot of, and I will tell you how to find the domain and range. Okay, so this was the concept that I told you. I'm going to give you one more example here. So domains means the values of x where the function exists, right? Domain is always the values of x, right? Okay. Okay. For example, I have another question. Y root x minus 1, for example, right? And the question is, what is a domain? Find the domain. So every function has its own nature, right? So this is a square root. Remember one thing, for the square root, apply this situation. Whatever the value in a square root, it is defined when the value of x is 0 or greater than 0, right? So here, what is under the square? and square root. You can see x minus 1. So how will you find this one? X minus 1, this one, right? This must be what? 0 or greater than 0, right? Now you can find the value of x. So the question is minus 1 shifted on the right side. So it says that you can take what? 1 or greater than 1. So what is the number which is greater than 1? So 1, 2, 3 and so on. So positive infinity. I'm not going to take positive infinity. So what is the domain now? I'm going to take 1. So which bracket I'm going to use? A close bracket, right? We can say we can take 1. And then I'm not going to take infinity. For the infinity, remember one thing in your mind. For infinity, I will never use the close bracket. I always use what? Open bracket. So the domain is from 1 to positive numbers, right? If you give any number, for example, 1 to positive infinity for check. So for example, if you say x is equal to 5, okay, check, no problem. If you put 5 here, so it will be what? 5 minus 1, what is the answer? 4. And 4 means what? 2, positive 2 or negative 2, for example, right? And this one exists. But if you give any number except this one, for example, if I am saying minus 5, minus 5 is not here, right? So if you put minus 5 here, what is the result? Look, x was what? Minus 5. And this is minus 1. It becomes minus 6. And I said to you in a square root, if any value is in negative, it does not exist. So this 5 is not a domain, right? This is not a domain. So the domain is only 1 to positive infinity. Domain means again the values of x where the function exists, where the function defined. I hope guys you all understand, and I promise you that when you see my next lecture where we solve many questions based on domain, okay, you will understand the concept of domain. So whenever you are having any function, you must know what is the domain, because domain plays a very important role in mathematics, right? And after the domain, I will explain you what is a range. Just like the same things, domain is the values of x, range is the values of y, right? Functional values. So I will tell you step by step. So first we focus about only the domain. So inshallah in my next lecture, I will explain you how to find the domain. I hope guys you all understand. Take care. Assalamu alaikum.